All right, welcome to class number 4 of our Relationship Mastery course. And I turn right over to our beloved Katrina.
Welcome. So, today's session is Ask Well, Live Well. And today is about the art of creating empowered requests and gracefully negotiating to create win wins as a way of life. And we're going to start, as we often do, with a drop in meditation. Just recognizing that it might have been busy this morning. There might be multiple things on our mind, and so this is our opportunity to be able to drop in to the present moment, to connect with your body and with your breath, and to anchor in somatic awareness of yourself, your sensations, feelings, values, and what brought you here today. So I invite you to really take this time to breathe deeply, recognizing that the breath is connected to the nervous system. When your breath is short and shallow, it tends to be that the nervous system is in some kind of a flight, fight, freeze, survival mode. And when we can consciously breathe long and deep, we're telling the body, I'm safe. This safety creates presence. And that presence is the foundation of our work. Becoming deeply present to your own form, what's alive in your being, the truth that comes from within. And maintaining that as an anchor, always connected to self, as we also learn to relate to those around us and to life. Staying deeply attuned and caring for ourselves. And building the resource so that we're able to also extend our care to others from a sense of presence, grounding, clarity, compassion, and overflow. So I invite you to notice what you feel in your body, what's alive in you as you come into this session today. And perhaps to turn your mind to something that's happening in life that you'd love for it to change. You'd love to find some kind of more harmonious way of being than it currently is. Because today we're working on empowered requests and graceful negotiations. We're learning to see how can we express what's deep in our heart to another person in a way that creates the highest chance that they can hear us, understand us, and find the natural motivation to contribute to something that is more harmonious. That's the work we're doing. It's not to tell anyone they're wrong or to try and change them, but rather to work with what Star Wars might call the Force, and what Marshall called beloved divine energy. And it is this sweetness we can tap into where we're connected and feel a joy contributing to one another. So I invite you to take a few more breaths. And then, as you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to sharing space with the whole room here.
That was really beautiful, Katrina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today we're going to really discover the art form of making requests, because learning how to create an invitation to connect um, is so important, especially when we really want something. And just yesterday, in one of my sessions with a client couple that are in a really troubled place with each other, and it just consistently saw how each person was so focused on what they wanted and needed, and really struggled to take the time to connect before going to what they wanted to express, what they wanted to say, what they needed. And I was thinking, wow, I'm so glad we're teaching this class today because it's so important. So thank you very much, and it's great to have all of you here with us. And Katrina, I guess just bring up slide at a time, and we'll get going.
All right, we'll start here. So,
And that's really what it is all about. The beauty of this of relationship mastery is that we are constantly creating win-win. We're leaving the world of right and wrong. We're leaving the world of good and bad. We're leaving the world of us versus them. And on a spiritual level, we're really practicing oneness. We hear a lot about oneness in our spiritual teachings and on the awakening world. Um, these are the practical tools of how we actually really experience the win-win approach to our relationships and our communications.
I am having a hard time flipping through the slides this way. Where'd we go? Let's try this again. You're getting a preview.
You're getting it, yeah, right. We're going backwards.
Yeah, it's not going to the next slide, so I'm gonna have to exit the full screen mode and try that again.
Okay. Um, and a
Right.
reminder, I'll keep an eye on the chat box. Um, and so, definitely if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. I'm pretty good at keeping an eye on it. Uh, and thank you, Diara. She talks about, would you be willing to? Absolutely. That's like the best way to preface almost every question. So, um, how's it going with finding there we go.
There we go.
All right. So when we when we want something from another, um, these are some of the old ways that we do it that are not very effective. And so I want to invite all of you to, so we start making it participatory. Which of these ones might be ways that you still currently fall into? Like, when you're wanting something, maybe you kind of hint at it. Oh, I love flowers. Hint, hint. Or you're just waiting for the other person to figure out what you want. Um, or you're really just hoping, God, please, you're praying, may he, may she call me back, whatever it is. And then sometimes you just fall into resenting. You get resentful because you haven't been getting your needs met. So let's just take a moment and please put in the chat box. Ideally, everybody, which of these might you still do? And if you don't do any of them anymore, that's great.
Hmm. Let's see, Susan wrote, hoping and waiting. Diara said all of these at times. Uh-huh. Diara
Aru said
said,
more all. Oh, go ahead, Katrina. I'll let you
yeah,
do it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm better at voicing my requests. And Scott says, hinting, although I've gotten better at just asking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I see a lot of people are really recognizing themselves in these various ways that we maybe hope that the other person has developed a psychic power and can read our minds and know exactly what it is we want and then deliver on it. I know I have done that certainly in the past. I thought, goodness, it's so obvious to me what I want. They should just know, right? And oftentimes this runs in the background unconsciously until we actually look at it and recognize, like, how many of you right now have such psychic power that you could tell me what I had for breakfast? It's this funny fantasy that we have as human beings that people can read our mind and just know what we want. And actually, I will say one of the really cool things about learning the form of communication that Scott and I are teaching you is that when you really practice it with your partner for years, your attunement becomes so high, you will get better at reading their mind. But that skill is developed by having really clear, open, honest communication on a regular basis so that you learn the attunement through a very clear communication. And after a while, you can pick up on subtle cues. So the magic can happen, but it really takes work to get there until we all evolve into some next form of human being. Actual clear communication makes a world of difference. And Tiara made a guess. Oh my God. Pop Tarts, a smoothie, bacon, eggs, and yogurt. Nope. I did
Um,
have yogurt though.
I
There we
want to
go.
welcome, we have a couple more people that joined us. And today we're talking about making requests. And that first, bring up that slide
Uh-huh.
just one more time, please, Katrina.
Sure.
So we're just looking at this opening slide, which are some of the things that we do. Instead of making clear requests, we sometimes do these things. And it's interesting as you look at it, the progression. We start with hinting, then we are waiting for a response, then we're really hoping and praying for a response, and then if we don't get what we want, we go into resentment. And all of that is based on not having the skills that we're going to learn today of how to make clear requests. So
Mhm.
beautiful,
I,
beautiful slides. Thank you.
yeah, I also want to just add that resenting piece. When resentment starts to build in a relationship, it's it's corrosive to the relationship. So, when you think of like metal and it starts to break down and corrode and like literally it breaks down, resentment, if it's not well handled, is corrosive to a relationship. It will completely undermine the relationship. And so this skill of clearly asking for what you want is a way to express love and care for the relationship itself. And in one of our future sessions, we will be looking specifically at what do you do when resentment has already built, because there is a way you can handle that. This is the preventative measure to resentment. Let's prevent it before it starts to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's honestly in almost every coaching session, I pretty quickly explore how much resentment is already in the field. And of course, most people that are coming to me are coming because their relationship is challenged. And you know, resentment, you're right. It's and it's like this subtle thing that just eats away. And it's like the more there's resentment, the love changes. It's sad. And I'm sure we all can relate to it. I'm sure we can all think of relationships that move from being primarily loving to filled with a lot of resentment. So this is the way to avoid that.
Mhm.
All right. Next slide.
Yeah, well, so a foundation to all of this, to making requests and the empathy that's required before you make a request, is to notice how well resourced are you. And this is actually something that Scott brought into my awareness, and I use it in every session with people because I just find it's so helpful. And so Scott's going to walk you through it, and we'll get the master himself walking you through the
Okay.
resource scale.
Yeah, here's an interesting thing about how well resourced you are. It's so, every session I do, I start the session by asking my clients, how well resourced are you? What's the state of your being? How are you? Did you have enough food and rest? How's your body temple doing? Um, what's your emotional state? What's your energetic state? Uh, and it's so important for us to know where we stand before we even begin to go into any further connection. And it's fascinating to me how few people think about being well resourced. A few years ago, I gave a keynote speech at a functional medical doctors conference. Now, these are functional medical doctors, right? They're like the on the cutting edge of medicine. And I got up and I asked, and there were maybe 150, 200 people in the audience. And I asked by raise of hands, how well resourced are all of you today? Well, first, I asked, how well resourced are you? Tuned in. What does it look like? And I could tell there's like a kind of a almost questioning the audience. I said, by raise of hands, how many of you are confused by my question? And almost everybody raised their hands. And then I asked, how many of you even think about how well resourced you are or your clients are? And just a handful of people raised their hands. And these are functional medical doctors, right? So it's like a whole new consciousness. So constantly asking yourself, and then if you're living with someone or if you're working with someone, the people that you're in your daily connection with, ask them all the time, how well resourced are you? And if we're going to use a Likert scale of 1 to 10, a 1 to 2, well, don't even begin to try and talk about anything important. They immediately need to just get immediate support. Maybe they need rest. Maybe they need food. Maybe they need something. We've got to get straight into physical taking care of the body. Um, a 3 or 4, I would say a 3 or 4 is where many people live. Especially like I'm working a lot right now with women that are mothers of young children, and young children just require so much energy. And honestly, I would say a lot of the clients I work with are living in 3 to 4, just getting through the day. They're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they're just trying to get through the next project, get the next thing done. Um, 5 to 6, well, that's middle ground. And that's, I guess, where the other majority of the population lives. Most people are in 3 to 4 or 5 to 6. Um, 7 to 8, maybe that's a Saturday, right? For some people, or a Sunday. And think about it. How often are you in 9 or 10? How often? You know? So obviously we all go through different things, but I'm just curious, maybe putting into the chat box, take a minute and share, where do you think you live? Now, some of you might say, God, I go all the way from a 3 to a 9, and that's okay. Or some of you might say, I'm pretty consistent, a 5 or a 6. Maybe some of you are more consistently in three or four. So, where do you find yourself primarily? Casey writes, rarely am I a nine or a 10. Scott, the other Scott says, I drift from five to seven. Uh, Aru is five to six.
Mhm.
Omashar is five to seven. Bruna is seven to eight. Welcome, Bruna. Omashar, five to seven. It said, DR says, I used to be in 9, 10 fairly consistently in 2020. And then I went into one, two, three, four. Been in three, four, and working my way back up the ladder. I'm in
Mm.
five, six, or seven, eight now. Wow, that's quite a roller coaster ride you've been on, Diara. And thank you for being honest. Adelina writes five to six, and Mark writes, welcome, Adelina. Mark writes five to six most of the time, dip down to three, four sometimes, up to seven, eight often, and sometimes I'll even get to nine, 10. So there's a good example of just, the range that some people are in. Audrey
Mhm.
writes, just mainly isolating, hard to relate, uh, not in crisis. Oh, thank you. Brad writes, recently, consistently three or four, previously seven or nine. Now, Brad's going through a hard time in his life. And so that can happen. We might go from being consistently in a seven to nine, and then a crisis happens or something really hard happens, and we slip down to those lower numbers.
Mhm.
Um, so,
Yeah. Really appreciate everyone just checking in and noticing where they're at. Hopefully, you can see how valuable it is just to notice. And of course, when you're in those low numbers, to really ask, what is it I need? What could help me get my number higher than this? Meditation can be helpful, conscious breathing can be helpful. And actually, one of the things that I've found, and science also says, is one of the best ways to build strength and resiliency is literally strength training. When you do strength training, and that's lifting weights, it's not walking, it's not running, it's not cardio, but resistance training actually releases hormones in the body that support strength and resiliency, support you to feel centered, calm, balanced, well resourced. So if you don't have a whole lot of time for self care, but you can do sit ups and push ups, that actually is one of your quickest ways to get your number higher. And if you can do that on a daily basis, it's a remarkable practice to put in just to get those numbers higher. But when we're in that poorly resourced space, we really want to look at what are the needs that are not sufficiently met, and what are ways that we can meet these needs that won't make matters worse. Right? We don't want to meet our needs at the cost of someone else, where it could make matters worse. But really be attentive to what matters to me, what's most important to me today, and what's an action I can take to care for myself more fully. So this is just a great list to refer to on a regular basis.
one last thought, at least for me, on this is I invite you to change your languaging to others, and especially people that are important to you. Change it from hi, how are you to how well resourced are you? Just changing that question. Because when we hear or say hi, how are you, almost everybody says fine, regardless of whether they're at a two or whether they're at a nine. It's become just a rote reactive response. It's almost always very superficial. But how well resourced are you forces someone to, it's like a pattern disrupt, right? Instead of just fine, it's like, wow, how well, what's that mean? Right? And so it's a much deeper question to ask, and it requires a more substantial answer. And so just changing that one thing actually can change a relationship. And since Scott and our Rue are our couple that are with us today, we also have Brad and Casey. Um, as couples, it's a beautiful thing to be consistently checking in. Hey, how well resourced are you right now? You know,
Hmm.
and as a result, Scott drinks more water. Our Rue uh, takes a breather. Brad, uh, goes for a walk in nature in case she
Hmm.
remembers to eat and not just work on all the stuff she's working on, right?
Hmm.
So,
Couples cuddle with each other more. When they have the capacity to cuddle with each other, that can be very co-regulating. Or to pull out a massage table and just give each other a half hour of nurturing touch. And that can also be very rejuvenating. If you're not in a couplehood, find a friend who you can do that with, where you've got just the safety of co-regulation through physical nurturing. Can be very helpful. Another
Audrey's
piece,
Audrey's asking, who would understand the phrase, how well resourced are you?
yeah,
Well, if somebody doesn't understand it now because you've watched this class, you can explain it to them. So you could even
that's
say,
right.
I'm in a class and I learned something really wonderful. Instead of asking, hi, how are you? I want to ask, how well resourced are you? Because I care about you. And again, being well resourced is what's the state of your body? What's the state of your emotions? Have you had enough food, water, rest? Um, what's your, what's the real state of your being? It's a
Mhm.
beautiful way to connect more deeply.
Yes. Another piece I wanted to share here, I do a lot of mediation work. I know Scott does as well. And when doing mediation work, it's even more important to know how well resourced both people are when they're coming into a difficult conversation, right? They reach out to us because they're like, we need help with this conversation. It's not going well. And so when somebody is below a 5 coming into a mediation, as a facilitator holding space, I know that we need to move very slowly because they're not well resourced and could be more likely to take something personally, to hear it in a different way than it was intended, or to have a reaction, to be more sensitive. And so we really slow it down. And oftentimes I'll take extra care to support somebody's resource feeling higher. When you receive really high quality empathy from someone, and this is something that we encourage you to practice with each other, when you receive very high quality empathy, that's another way to lift your number from a lower number to a higher number. Just being deeply heard and understood and feeling someone else's genuine care can make a tremendous difference. So when you're entering into a difficult conversation with another person, this is a great question to ask. And you might hear the response and go, you know what? Let's both just take some time to take care of ourselves and come back to this when we can feel better resourced. If we have any time and space to make that happen, let's try to do that, because the higher your resource is, the more likely a conversation will go well. Right. So requests is the focus of our session today, and I wanted to put that in the context of nonviolent communication. And for those of you who are newer to nonviolent communication, it's a process that was created by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg in the 1970s. And basically, it's like the most brilliant process I've seen for moving from conflict into harmony. And at the foundation of it, the practice that is most often referred to is something called the 4-step process. It starts with observations, and this is very clear, objective observations of what's happening in the external world, things that everyone can agree with. A video camera, if they saw it, would see these things happening, hear these sounds happening. So observations are very objective. And there's subjective observations. That's knowing yourself. How am I feeling about this? What am I thinking about this? Nobody can tell you what your thoughts and feelings are. those are your own. So the first step is just to notice like what's so. Then the next two steps are to identify our emotions and our needs about what's so. And that's where we referred to this list here. These are the universal human needs. And then there's emotions we have when our needs are well met, and emotions we have when our needs are not well met. And so the identifying feelings and needs is the next piece. When we identify our own, that's self-empathy. And when we identify another person's, that's empathy for the other person. These three steps, the observations, feelings, and needs, then give us a foundation from which we can have enough shared reality between two people that we can go, okay, we clearly see what the problem is, and now we can try and look at solutions. So requests is a way that we start to offer potential solutions. And in each of these, I also have, you can see it says observation versus evaluation, feelings versus feelings mixed with thoughts, needs versus strategies, requests versus demands. In nonviolent communication, there are a list of what we call key distinctions. And it's a way of understanding something more clearly, especially in contrast to what it's not. So you can see some examples in the screen here. We're not going to go too deep into this right now. What we will go into today is the context or the distinctions of requests versus demands, because in order to make a very empowered, clear request and also to gracefully negotiate, this key distinction is going to be very important for us today. So that's included in the slides, and all of this we're going to go deeper into over the course of relationship mastery. And again, today, the focus is really on requests. So I just want to look in the chat for a moment to see if there's questions. I just see Susan asked empathy or projection, and I'm not quite sure what that meant. Could you clarify that question for me?
Well, when you're looking at somebody or trying to figure out what they want, I mean, how do you know whether you're picking up what you think they want or you're sort of putting your own story onto it?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question because we're putting our stories on all the time. We have projections happening all the time. I could say, "Oh, you don't have your camera on. I'm assuming it's because you still have curlers in your hair." Right? I could make up a story and it's not necessarily true. And so there's a great practice, which is to acknowledge what is our guess out loud and then check in with the other person. Is that true for you or not? Please give me more information so that I can align my understanding with what's actually true. Does that make sense to you, Susan?
Yes, yes, that's it.
Okay, great.
And you always want to check in. It's so important for us to ask, is this accurate? What I'm imagining is, um, and we're going to actually, a little bit later, we're going to see it's actually called a connection request. And that's a very important part. And the very first requests, ideally, are connecting requests to check in with each other. So,
All
okay.
right. So when we're building a request, these are some questions we're seeking to answer through the model. Scott, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. So, this is a good way to form your thoughts, a good way to really kind of memorize, like, all right, well, who is it that I'm wanting to make a request of? Here, I'll make a example. I'll choose something with Katrina.
There's a
So,
line you wanted to make me to make, so
yeah, so I actually, Katrina recently made a really funny slide. She made a funny meme where she took one of my quotes, um, and and she took a picture of me, and then she took a quote that I often use. Here, I'll pull it up and I'll screen share it so you know what I'm talking about. And it's really kind of fun. So all right. So we're going to use an example here. So she recently created this where she took my quote, "Thou shalt not react to an interpretation or projection of the other." And she took the photo and she made this really adorable little AI slide of Scott and one of his commandments. Okay. Well, I so loved it that I started thinking to myself, wow, it would be really fun to have her make some more slides. So if you go back, Katrina,
Yes.
to the slide. So in my mind, I was thinking, God, it would be really cool. I should make a whole series of commandments, maybe eventually get to 10 commandments, right? So who? Well, obviously only Katrina could do this. I can't imagine anyone else doing it. Well, what do I want her to do? I want her to, make as I come up with different Scottisms and Scott quotes to have her make these images for me. When? Now, that's a good question. Luckily, this is not urgent. This is not something that, has to be done by a certain date. It's a total just fun little lark. Um, and when I did make the request to her, she asked me, or she said, I'm not going to get to this until Monday at the earliest. And I said, that's fine. Um, she didn't ask me why, but it's really important for to be prepared for that. Um, like why? Because they're so fun, and I want to
Yes,
start giving
they
them
are.
to my clients, and they're just they're great and they're fun, and they actually could be very useful as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are so there it is. There's an example of building a request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're making requests all the time, and you don't necessarily spell out every answer to each of these questions, but it's good to have them in the back of your mind. And if somebody makes a request to you, um, and it's not completely clear, you can ask for clarity on, can you let me know exactly what it is you're asking me to do? If it doesn't make sense to you, you could ask why is this important to you? Right? All of this builds a deeper sense of connection and relationship to each other. So, yep, asking these questions is a way that you can just build more clarity into your requests. All right. So, Scott used an example of something that's fun. It wasn't an upset at all. It was just like, hey, let's add more joy to life. And I'm like, yes, I'm totally up for that. So, those will be coming out probably in the coming week. Of course, I told him I won't get to it right now. I got a few things on my plate, but I should be able to early next week. So, oftentimes, though, um, there's something that's not working. Something happened, it hurt, it's not working. And so there's an upset that we're looking to address. And so, again, I'm bringing this back to that nonviolent communication four-step process: the observation, feeling, need, and request. And these are ways that you can organize your mind and also build a dialogue to be able to express to someone else, like, ouch, something hurt, something didn't work for me. I'd like to share it with you so that you can understand it. And I'm thinking about what could work as repair for me. And so the observation, you want to say what actually happened. Um, Now, one of the things that I've used as an example, and this is from a long time ago, but I had quite a few challenges with my ex-husband before learning nonviolent communication. And so one of the observations was we said that we were separated, but we needed to meet in order to just exchange our son um, for our timeshare. And so we would make plans. We're going to meet at 5 o'clock at this particular spot. And I would show up at 5 o'clock and he wouldn't be there. And he'd maybe show up at 5:20. So that's what happened. That's the observation. Now, I also created a bunch of story about that. So my feelings and needs, and this is subjective, and I'm separating that from the objective. The subjective is my thoughts were he's inconsiderate, he doesn't care, he never cared, this is why we're not married. And I would get very upset. I'd feel frustrated, disheartened. I'd start to recreate this sense of heartbreak and indignance. And I so there was observation what happened, and then I had a subjective observation. And both of those had impact. If I just looked at like, okay, he's running 20 minutes late. Well, sure, I feel frustrated. I feel irritated. I have a need for integrity as it relates to commitments. I have a need for trust. I have a need for a sense of respect, and that didn't meet my need for respect. And so then my request would be, would you please really work to be on time? And if it turns out this time doesn't work, give me a new time so that we can meet at the same time. Right. So that's how I would resolve an upset if I were just to look at the objective observation through the request. I also want to just give another layer to this because I also had at that time all kinds of subjective observations. I had all kinds of upset that I had about him. He's inconsiderate, he's uncaring. This is how it used to be. This is why our marriage didn't work. That was also generating feelings and needs. And yet, if I'm holding him accountable for my thoughts, not just for him being late, but for my thoughts that he's inconsiderate and disrespectful. Okay, now my feelings have amplified. Now I feel indignant and irritated and stressed and impatient, and I have needs for respect and care and kindness and love, and like everything has amplified. And then I might make requests that are just unreasonable in the context of us having already separated. So I just want to point that out because looking at the objective observation is one thing, and then we want to notice what's everything else that it stirs up. And we want to be self-responsible. This was one of the pillars in our class 1. We want to be self-responsible for everything that has gotten stirred up in ourselves and say, okay, those are my feelings, my needs, and my thing to take care of. But what I can look at that is objectively an observation is we agreed at 5. We agreed it was going to be 5. It's now 5:20. That doesn't work for me. So I can communicate that to him. And can I be respectful and understanding of what's alive in him too? So observation, we said 5, it was 5:20. I'm feeling frustrated and irritated. I have a need for trust. I have a need for respect for my time, for integrity with our agreements. My request is, can we choose a time and really make that time happen? Okay, it's much simpler when we have a really clear observation. Will be, again, this topic of observations. It can take a while to really get this one. We're going to go deeper into this one. Again, we've touched on it in previous sections. We'll go deeper into it again in some of our future sessions. And so I want to touch on it as we're looking at how we build our request to recognize self-responsibly what's mine and what's objective, what's something we can agree on, what's the shared reality that we're trying to solve. Okay, I just want to pause there. I see, Aru, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I can see the, going into the observation, feeling, need, request, but but I'm wondering if, like, right when it happens, right, with this person who I'm going to assume they don't know nonviolent communication, but I would want to know why immediately. Like, we were supposed to meet at 5, did you have traffic or, what, did something happen? So how do you ask that question without sounding accusatory? But that's what I would want to know is, why was this person late? And then also, if it's a pattern, I would get quite a bit more angry, like if it happened over and over again
Right.
versus just this was the first time.
Yeah.
And if there's an apology, like I would want to hear an apology, that, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm late.
Right.
I know we were supposed to meet at 5. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
The,
And how perfectly human that is to have an emotional reaction that's happening and it's in this space as soon as they arrive. And I want to address it. I want answers. I want an apology. I want a commitment. Like, this is what I want now. And it does run a risk of creating an escalation and making matters worse. And so what we want to do here is help you to first notice the reaction, which from the know yourself, like anytime the emotions get to a certain threshold, we can go on to autopilot. So the first thing we want to do is pause
Mhm.
and we give ourselves empathy. I'm feeling frustrated right now. I have a need for respect that was not met by this. I've got a lot going on in me. And just give ourselves that emergency dose of self empathy so that we can cool down from our tendency towards reactivity. Because if we don't take that step to cool down, it will likely come through our tone of voice, even if we have the words right. It will likely come through some little expression in our face or body language, even if we have
mhm.
the words right. So that pause and cooling down is essential to go, okay, I have pain. And then can we have unconditional positive regard for the other person so that we're coming from a place that's grounded, centered, and really going, I want the best outcome for both of us. Then we can ask like, hey, I felt impacted because we said it was going to be this time and it ended up being that time. And I'd really love to know that you value that I can count on commitments and that you value my time. Can you help me understand what happened? So that's the childlike curiosity pillar that we had, which is different than what happened.
Yeah, but I would also expect the person, if they're 20 minutes late, to say something like, oh, yeah, sorry, I'm late. There was traffic or whatever. If they don't say that, yeah, that would set me off a little. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I see how having the internal empathy first before speaking up.
Yeah.
So much of what we've talked about before, like in the last 10 minutes, is all preparation before coming into contact. Using this example, during that 20 minutes or 25 minutes that Katrina's been waiting, she can either just be stewing and going over and over and over, here it is, this is why we're divorced, blah, blah, blah. Or she can be doing this homework. She can be getting in touch with, yes, this is triggering my resentment. This is triggering my anger. Giving herself those emergency dosages of self-empathy so that when the husband finally arrives, she's not at, in ready to attack, but she's given herself enough self-empathy, enough understanding that she can still be very clear and firm in asking why, in expressing herself, but she's coming to it from the frontal lobe instead of the back part of the brain. Remember earlier we took a look at the different parts of the brain, and she's not coming from survival. She's not coming even from emotional. She's coming from that frontal lobe where she still is clear and she's going to make clear requests, but it's not coming with an attack energy. It's coming with a clear in my own strength energy.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I've done, because I mean, how many of us have somebody in our lives, or maybe we're that person in other people's lives, who always runs late? Like it's pretty predictable. Yes, Scott is one of those people. We celebrate when he's on time. And Scott's my dear friend. I value this relationship. So I learned how to work with it. I recognize that there's times when he's going to show up on time. So I'm ready. And there's times when, for whatever reason, he's got a client who was in crisis and the session is running over. Like things happen. And so I also will ask myself, it's like, okay, here's one of the times when my dear friend is running late. How can I prepare so I can make the most of my time, whether they're there or not, so that I don't get bent out of shape by this? Right? When it's a pattern with someone, it's like there's a certain amount of like, okay, let's just see that the pattern is here. We try to address it. And then ultimately you go, does this work for me or not? Does this friendship matter to me enough that I'm willing to work with this pattern? Or is it a deal breaker that's so significant that I just need to say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. And so I'm shifting the relationship so that I can find a way to make it work. Right? There are other things that would create upset for me where I'm like, that's not happening. Like name calling. You want to call me a this or that? No, that just doesn't work in my world. Other people might accept that, but that doesn't work in my world. And I will put up a big boundary. I'm not going to look at, how to work. I will communicate. I'll see if we can fix it. But ultimately, if that's the kind of upset I'm having and a person won't address it, for me, that's a deal breaker. On the being late, there's so many people who are late that I've really had to go, is this okay? Do I accept this in the fullness of the relationship we share? And of course, with Scott, the answer is 100%. Have I had
I was on time this
communication?
morning.
Yes.
I was early. I was 1 minute
Today
early.
he was on time. Woohoo! And we can laugh about it.
Yeah.
It's not every once in a while I need something that's more on time and I'll let him know like this is really important to me. But again, coming back to that question, can you notice when your system is getting jangled? Can you notice when you're starting to go into reactivity? And go, oh, self-empathy. What am I feeling? What do I need? And what's my best use of this time, given what is right now? How can I care for myself so that my resource is high and I can show up with as much presence as I can bring, and I can prepare myself for a conversation to see if we can address this? I'm curious what might be percolating for you.
Nothing new in the chat box.
Yeah, Aru.
Yeah, I can attest to that working because Scott knew my husband Scott, who's on here, was saying like, he'd always get very upset because whenever we go to my parents' house, which to me I think of a social thing as you don't really have to be perfectly on time. We go there for lunch every Sunday. So, I would just be still getting ready and he's standing by the door. And I never really understood how upset he was. But one day, when I taught him about this, observation, feeling, need request, he said it like he was making the observation. I've been standing by the door several times and you're not there. I forget what he said, anxious and, annoyed and upset. I'm really needing to get there. Or I'm needing, whatever the word was, on time, maybe respect, consideration. Would you be willing to be at the door when, at a certain time, whatever time it was, to get there? So, and that made such a big difference just when he said it like that. I wasn't triggered because it wasn't about me like, oh, you're always late. What's wrong with you? It was, all in his from his perspective. And then I was like, wow, I can see how important this is to him.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, Scott, you missed my little celebratory gift here I put across the screen. Fabulous. Really celebrating that you took that moment and found a way to go, okay, I don't want to make my wife, my beloved, wrong, and this is having an impact. And you were able to express to her in a way that was just sharing like, hey, there's some impact here, and this is what I would love instead. And I can see how much that worked for her, and it like touched her heart, because then there's a deeper sense of closeness. Then there's a sense of we can work together and we can have a good time. Whereas if you're like, they're waiting and the irritation is growing and then she's ready, that's probably going to be a more tense car ride, and it's probably going to impact the brunch. So you taking this step and finding the observation, the feeling and need, and the request, and giving an opportunity for her to hear it, like that's dropping into what we call that divine beloved energy, beautiful beloved divine energy that Marshall Rosenberg talks about, where it's just this human to human connection of like, oh wow, yeah, there's impact and I want to contribute to, I love you. And these solutions can happen with more ease. So I really love that example, Aru and Scott, as it relates to the art of requests. Thank
And
you.
Scott did put into the chat box that it was respect for his time,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps respect also for the parents that might be waiting.
Yeah.
I notice we're at 10 o'clock, and I'm wondering if people want to take a 3-minute break. Go to
And take a
gallery.
3-minute break.
I
All right.
also just want to add it was my parents, not his parents.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
if it was his, I might have been more on time.
Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Now
That's
that's
Yeah.
interesting, though. What an interesting in itself, even that's like an interesting psychological differentiation, right? So anyway, all right, let's all come back
Okay.
in 3 minutes. Have a good potty break. I'll pause it.
All right. Tools. So welcome back.
Welcome back. So Scott wrote in the chat box, that was a good moment in our relationship. It was very difficult for me to initiate the conversation in that way, but as I took a few words in the right direction, it started to flow in a positive and connecting way. In the past, I would say a few words in the wrong direction and it would go badly. So first of all, thank you, Scott, for putting that in the chat box.
Yeah.
And thank you, Scott and Aru, for letting us use this as a perfectly human example from real life.
Mm-hmm. So the next slide we're going to go into really talks about the difference between request versus demand, and also clarity. Are we being vague and specific? And Scott's going to take it away on this slide. So I'll pull it up here.
I'm so appreciating that she made this slide because for years I've been using a little simple black and white one that just had the words. But it's so important for us to really learn how to make a clear request. And the key is for it to be specific and for it to be a request. Um, and so often we'll be vague. Um, uh, the giraffe that wants the air conditioning to be, turned on. Um, and it's just kind of like, oh, it's getting kind of hot around here. That's back to remembering the first slide we looked at. It's back to the kind of the hoping or the wishing. Um, we're not being clear, we're being vague. Um, Now, one of the big things we're going to talk a lot about today is the difference between a request and a demand. And there's a simple litmus test. We'll talk more about it in a moment, but I want to briefly say it's a demand if we have an energy of not being willing to hear no. If we're not willing to hear no, it has the energy of demand. So we never want to make demands, we want to make requests. So it's a dialogue. It's not just a so a vague demand, is where we're kind of like we're really wanting something, but we're being vague about it, and that's not good.
Mhm.
Um, we also don't want to make a specific demand. Step away from the vehicle and place your hands on your head. That's a very good example. That's about the most intense demand we could ever receive from an authority figure. Um, So what we really want to do is be in the upper right-hand corner. The upper right-hand corner of the four is what we want. We want to be specific and we want it to be a request. Um, and so as you look at this, again, maybe to kind of engage everybody, where might you be challenged? Are you challenged with being vague versus specific? Are you challenged with making demands instead of requests? Or are you, really pretty good about being specific and making it a request? So let's all put in the chat box kind of where we stand as we look at this. Where are we in our relationship to all of this?
Mhm. There can be some very common vague demands, like, I need you to treat me with respect. I need you to be more considerate. Ugh, I wish you were more sensitive. That would be more of a vague request, but when we're asking for our needs to be met without any specificity, I have a need for connection. I need you to connect with me more. So if we're just stating the need with passion, it's still vague. What does respect mean to you? Do you want me to open the door for you? Would you like me to call you Mr. or Mrs. and add your last name to it? Do you want eye contact? Do you want me not to give you eye contact? What what specifically does it mean?
So I'm going to read some of the comments that have come in. Scott T writes, I tend to be specific at work, but vague at home. That's a
Mm.
really good clarification. And that's pretty common, that we might, in a professional setting, we're maybe the bigger reptile, but at home, we're more docile. Brad writes, I can definitely be better at making specific requests. I'm probably mostly between vague request and specific demand. Okay. Mark Russo writes, I float between vague and specific, learning to be more specific since working with Scott. Thank you, Mark. JR writes, knowing that I have difficulty with a no at times leads me to be more aware that I may ask, but it comes across as a demand.
Mhm.
And I would ask you, TR, is it coming across as a demand or is it your fear that it's coming across as a demand? Um, and I'm genuinely asking. Um, uh, Aru wrote, specific demand usually, but getting better by adding, would you be willing to? Of course, but one thing about us NVC people, we can fall into the trap of thinking because we added, would you be willing to at the beginning, that all of a sudden we've done it perfectly. But if we're still not willing to hear no, right? And I think I'm not accusing you of this, Aru, but I think a lot of NVC people, there's some people I can think of that they just think, oh, well, if I say, would you be willing to walk on your head backwards through the snow? Um, because I said, would you be willing? You're supposed to do it, right? So we still have to check in with, am I willing to hear no?
Yeah, it's funny sometimes that preface, and would you be willing to? We relate to it as if it's abracadabra. I've
Right.
used the magic words. I said please.
Yep.
So now your response is supposed to say, of course.
Right.
Um, and and it doesn't work that way. We're asking, are you willing? Because we genuinely want to hear their honest response. Do you feel willingness? Do you feel very interested? Do you feel resistance? Or is this something that's just a really clear no for you? I
Mhm.
actually want to know your truth, Because when you and I can relate in an honest way, that's where we create win-wins. If either of us is being dishonest when we respond to a request, we're risking the deterioration of the relationship, right? If I have huge resistance, I don't want to say yes, but I say yes anyway. What are the chances that I could feel upset? And maybe that'll be working in the background because I already didn't say the truth. So now I'm upset about it and I'm doing it. And now I'm starting to build resent. And that resent can compile into being corrosive and undermine the relationship. I don't want that. I want relationships that are a full, wholehearted, joyful yes. And so when I ask, are you willing? My commitment is I actually want to know the truth more than I want a yes, even if I really, really, really want you to say yes. I prefer your truth. All right.
Mhm. I want to read a couple more comments that come in the chat box. I'm going to work with Tiara on the differentiation during our practice group after, in an hour. Audrey writes, I rarely ask anyone for anything starting at base zero. So, maybe Audrey, you're attracted to today's class because it's your soul is tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, it's okay to ask for things. It's okay. And this is how to do it. Um, Bruna writes, I'm in between. I need to learn to be very specific. Yeah, that's. Aru is asking, are there instances where no is not an option? For instance, in a work setting or with children? Great, great,
Mhm.
great point. No, I mean, there are certainly circumstances. Definitely, if in an employer-employee relationship, um, if it's an agreed upon part of the job. Um, so I would say that if there is a clear agreement and then you're just asking for the agreement to be fulfilled, then no is not an option unless there's, really a significant. You don't have to ask yourself that question. But the clear is, we're back to that word specific. If there is a clear, specific agreement in place, you don't have to do the process of checking in with yourself first. But if there's not a clear, specific agreement in place, then we come back to it being a request.
Mhm.
Katrina,
Yeah,
anything you want to add on that?
sure. So I think earlier when we talked about specific demands, you might have used the word we never want to do this. And it's, never, always and never. We're always look at that with a grain of salt. There are times when a specific demand makes sense. It does make sense for a police officer. If they're pulling over a vehicle and they believe there could be danger, it makes sense for that police officer to make a specific demand. If a child is about to run across a street and there's a possibility that a car is coming, it does make sense for a parent to demand that child stop immediately, right? If a child's going to do something that is dangerous for their well-being, it makes sense that a parent says stop immediately. It's not a request, it's a demand. That parent's job is to care for the well-being of their child. And the child's job, which they don't always know, is to listen to their parents, especially when their parents have their child's best interest in mind. And parents are learning, but parents generally have their child's best interest in mind. And so there are places where specific demands make sense. They serve life. We just want to make sure that they're not getting overused. If they're getting overused, then we run the risk of being authoritarian instead of authoritative and being controlling rather than guiding. So there's a balancing act. Specific demands are kind of like jalapeno peppers. use them sparingly. At least that's my culinary choice. Maybe we could use a hotter habanero for other people. But there are places where making specific demands can serve life, and it's not like making vague requests or vague demands are wrong. We just really want to make specific requests as much as possible. This is the sweet spot, right? So once you have a request created, then we want to test the request to see if it fulfills certain check marks, to see if it's an empowered request. And so I would love if people would just consider what is a request that they might make. So who would I ask? What would I ask them to do? And what needs would that meet for me? What's a request you could make? If you just take a moment to think of one. We do have a worksheet to guide you through this that we can use in the large room if we have time today before 11. Otherwise, it could be in a breakout room after, or on your own time during homework during the week. So I invite you to just think of a request, and then we're going to look at what are 4 questions you can ask to test the request to know, is this an empowered request? Is it specific, doable in time? And are you willing to hear a no? And so we have those on the next slide here. This is testing a request, and these are questions to ask yourself, right? Am I asking for what I do want rather than what I don't want?
I want to come in on that for a moment because that is so huge. Um, we always want to create a connection an invitation for connection. And so often people will come at it from a judgmental place. So it's the difference of you never get me flowers, or Charlie always buys flowers for his wife every week, both of which are judgmental and are going to create separation. But if you flip it into that time you bought me flowers meant a lot for me. I want you to know I really enjoyed when you get me flowers. It's clear, and you're remembering a time that it happened, and it's an invitation to connect. So really making it again the beauty of our longing. And even I want to acknowledge Robert Gonzalez, one of the teachers that was a big influence on Katrina and myself. And Robert taught the beauty of the unmet need. When we're in deficiency, when we're looking at the deficiency, flip it into the beauty of what we're longing for. This is one of my we'll have to make a commandment out of this one, Katrina,
Yes.
because it's so important to flip it into the beauty of what we long for as opposed to the attention of what's deficient. So anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So that first question, are you asking for what it is you do want, right? Instead of stop slamming the door, would you be willing, when you walk out of the room, to be attentive to closing the door more quietly? Okay, that's still fairly vague. But you could actually get up and go to the door and say, would you close it like this? You can demonstrate. That would just help my nervous system, because my nervous system is jumpy and gets stressed out with louder sounds. So ask for what you do want. Does it contain a doable action? Right? So if I say, I want you to be more sensitive, is that a doable action? No. If I say maybe I'm receiving touch, and it's a harder touch than I want. Maybe I could say, would you be willing to soften your touch and maybe just like Drag your fingers lightly on my skin with just a feather touch. That would feel lovely to me. Right, so very, very doable. That might meet a need for sensitivity as it relates to touch. Again, it could be sound. Would you be willing to lower your volume? That would be doable. Can it be fulfilled in a finite timeline rather than infinite timeline? So it might be asking right in the moment, would you be willing to do this right now? Or it might be, Scott had a request, would you be willing to teach relationship mastery with me again this spring? Right? And so it's this spring. And then we're looking at like, okay, well, let's see what dates work. And there's all kinds of requests inside of that. Here are the dates that work. Now we need to figure out our marketing timeline. We got to have our plan together, and when are we going to coordinate? So then there's a whole bunch of nested requests inside of a large request. And am I willing to hear no? And this is something we already began to talk about. So that's what we'll be dropping into next. Am I willing to hear no? I want to take a moment and check the chat. Or Scott, if you're watching the chat, see if there's anything we want to address there.
Just no, there's not much there. Going back a little bit earlier, Casey just talked about as a movement instructor, the value of specific demands, saving time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when there are agreements, if I get a coach and they're saying, do this, I've said, I want you to tell me what to do because I want to get the results that I know you can give me. So the coach is kind of making a demand. It's guidance, it's coaching. And I've already said yes to it, even if it's going to challenge my normal way of being. If I want different results, I need my way of being to be challenged. So there are times when it can really serve life to hear a stronger form of guidance or authority. But then this question, am I willing to hear no? And I really appreciate some of you said it's so difficult. No is really difficult for me to hear. And so I would invite you to just take a moment and recognize when you are speaking with someone and they make a request of you and you feel like you cannot say no, you are not permitted to say no. What emotions arise in you when you think of those moments? Maybe you can drop that in the chat. You could also raise your hand and share. What emotions come alive in you?
She writes, my challenge is shifting from movement teacher language to everyday language.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Like really shifting the role that we play out of the work world and not bring that role back home.
Mm-hmm.
Audrey's writes, I'm feeling this so deeply. I'm glad this is really working for you, Audrey. Thank you. TR, when no comes into her field, she feels frustration, angst, and conflicted about meeting their needs and mine. Thank you, TR. That's a really common one. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we can notice how it feels to feel like it's not okay to say no, and also notice what needs are not met when we don't feel like we can say no. Maybe it doesn't feel emotionally safe to say no. Maybe we don't trust that we'll still matter to the other person or be
Mm.
accepted. Maybe we're afraid they'll withdraw their love or some other form of resource from us, right? So fear can come in, vulnerability can come in, right? Some potent emotions. So I just invite you to really sit with that and recognize when you have a request for another person and you're not willing to hear no, those are probably the feelings and needs that are coming up for them.
Hmm.
Right? Now, imagine a time that somebody made a really strong request of you and you knew 100% they want to hear your truth. Whether it's a yes or a no, whatever it is, they're very, very interested in hearing your truth. What emotions do you feel when you're in a relationship where you know that your truth is welcome? Under all circumstances, your truth is welcome. I notice I feel more relaxed, open-hearted, present, loving, centered. And if you want to share in the chat.
Yeah, there's a few really good chats. Some of them go back a step. Susan writes, I'm also appreciative of this practice. Brad writes, I don't mind hearing no because it provides clarity. However, I'm less comfortable, but working on saying no. Thank you, Brad.
Mhm.
Scott T writes, when someone asks me something and I think I can't say no, I tend to feel resigned to it, which is
Mhm.
disempowering. Probably not using the right words here. I think that actually is really accurate, Scott. I think those are really good words. We are, when we can't say no, we are disempowered. There is a sense of being disempowered. So I really appreciate you speaking to that. Susan writes, I welcome people who value my truth. Diara writes, this is scary to me because I don't trust it. It's not been true in my experience as of yet. Tiara, I'm going to actually put the spotlight on you. Could you clarify a little bit? And you need to unmute, dear.
Okay, you guys just missed a really deep sigh, like, oh, why did I put that in the chat? Why did I save that
And
till
if you don't want to share right now, if you just want to take some time with it, we honor that as well, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm feeling into examples like with you, Scott. I know when there's a capacity you have for hearing and speaking truth and creating a safe space for that. So I'm beginning to experience what it's like to feel emotionally safe in a relationship to ask and receive true answers. But
Mhm.
in the past, I don't, there's not been that clarity. So
Yeah. So the trust, and I brought it up because there might be other people either in the Zoom room or watching this recording or of a similar thing. So what's scary is it hearing no that's scary, or is it speaking your truth that's scary?
you guys asked like what does it feel like to be with someone who truly wants to hear what you think and feel?
Right.
And I felt a sense of fear around that, not trusting that that's actually possible.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good. I'm glad you're both there. I feel really
Well, it's so, what you're saying is so resonant. I think there's a lot of others in the room who can feel that. And one of the things that Marshall spoke about a lot is how deeply we've been conditioned to communicate in a way that perpetuates systems of domination and submission.
Hmm.
And so nonviolent communication is breaking those molds because we have lived in a world that has been hugely in win-lose paradigm. Either you're dominating the people around you or you're learning to submit to try to get your needs met and maintain some level of safety. And so there has been conditioning that, I'm just somebody's going to dominate me. It's not going to be safe for me to say no. If I say no, they will withdraw their love. They will withdraw their resources. I won't belong. I could be an outcast. And that's terrifying
Mm.
to the nervous system. And this is the world that we have been living in. This is the conditioning. This is the cultural norm that has been prevalent for so long and still is very prevalent in many parts of the world. And so what we're doing, nonviolent communication and authentic relating and Love Coach Academy and all of these conscious communication modalities, is we're saying, hey, there's another way and it's so much better. Come join us. And so that's the new model that you're experiencing with Scott and increasingly with me as you get to know me. And it can be hard for the nervous system to say, this is real. I can trust this because there's been so much of something else.
Audrey has been writing in the chat box some really tender stuff, and I just want to acknowledge and kind of the summation of what she's been writing is just learning to feel emotionally safe and to be able to trust what other people say and do. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm. Thank
Yeah.
you, Diora. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you everybody for sharing vulnerably.
Mhm. So when we do have permission to speak our truth, there's greater emotional safety. There's a greater sense of ease. There's a sense of I matter. My voice matters. I can be heard, seen, and known. I'm safe here. I belong. And that's the gift we really want to give everyone as they relate to this practice of empowered requests and graceful negotiations. So we're always coming back to this needs list as an anchor. Right? The needs are what motivate all actions and help us gain a sense of deeper compassion for ourselves and the people around us, empathy and compassion. So when our needs for choice are well met, then there are many, many other needs that are also met. So when do you say no? And this is a wonderful piece of guidance to give other people, to let them know, hey, I really, really, really want you to feel safe in speaking your truth to me. So please do not fulfill my request. If you're doing it out of guilt, shame, fear, duty, or obligation, if you are doing it because you think you should, quote unquote, should, or to gain my affection or acceptance, right? That would be kind of a fawning response of no, rather than a grounded, authentic, wholehearted no. Or because you are afraid of how I'll react if you don't. I don't want you to fulfill my request if it's coming out of these places of fear or submission. Only fulfill my request if you're doing it fully by choice. It feels right and aligned for you. You feel motivated by your genuine desire to contribute, like the slides I'm making for Scott. It's joyful. If it meets some other need, longing, or value of yours, right? So in that example, again, meets needs for friendship and connection and play and creativity. And sometimes the request is difficult. Sometimes my husband might say, hey, I don't want you to go out of town that weekend. I'm really wanting time with you. Maybe there's something else that's pulling me, right? So it's not always easy to figure out what to do, but we want to just really sit with it and go, what's genuine for me here? And if you're not a wholehearted yes, then we get to explore what else is there. What's not wholehearted about it? right? But what we're looking for is a deeply honest response to the request. And I'd love to see how people are relating to this instruction on
I just
hearing and saying
I
no.
love this one so much. And it's such a higher consciousness way of thinking, you know. And it's so different from a lot of the win lose right wrong cultural training. So to really only want requests to be fulfilled because it feels good to the other person, feels good to both parties. Um, and even just that first line, when are we asking someone to do it? And the yes is based on a guilt, a shame, a fear, a duty, or an obligation. Yeah. Um, DR writes, this addresses the people pleasing, fawning thing. Absolutely.
Good.
Aru writes, so true. Doing something for someone when you aren't giving from the heart, you actually end up hurting them because you grow resentful. Susan writes, this instruction makes me feel good.
All right. I'm going to move some windows around so I can grab the next slide here. So this is from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, and I like to talk about this consent piece as really being sacred, right? It's a sacred trust to say, hey, I want to be vulnerable for asking for what I really want, and I want to hear your truth. I want to be in that place of our mutually joyful yes. I want to be in a place of win-win here. And so Marshall wrote, NVC helps me to stay connected with that beautiful divine energy within myself and to connect with it in others. It's giving that comes from the heart willingly, not out of duty, obligation, fear of punishment, hope for reward, not out of guilt or shame, but for what I consider is our nature to enjoy giving to one another. When we really connect in those needs that are alive. And again, looking at that needs list, whoops, I was about to grab it and I had another pop-up happen here. Okay, I can do this. Where is it? Here we go. When we look at this needs list and you think of all the people in the world, like, I want these needs met for everyone. There's
Yeah.
not a single person I can think of on the planet where I'd say, oh, I don't think you deserve the need for laughter or the need for recognition or integration or purpose. Like, no, I want these needs met for everyone. So when I meet someone and have a heart-to-heart connection and I understand that they have a need they're desperately trying to meet and don't know how, I'm naturally motivated. I'm naturally interested in seeing if there's a way I can contribute with the time and energy and resources I have available from my overflow.
Mm.
If you're in that 1 to 4 range, maybe even 1 to 5 range in terms of resource, you may not have sufficient overflow. Then you can simply say, I care, I want that need for you met, and I don't have the resource. I wish you all the best. That's fair. If you have overflow and the ability, like, oh, it feels joyous. Can I help you have your need for recognition met, to be heard, to be seen, understood? Can I support your desire for teamwork, celebration, beauty? Like, oh, it feels good. And so there's this sense of true joy. If we were to look at the Know Yourself long PDF, we went deeply into anger, but one of those 4 primary emotions is joy. And there's really a sense of true, deep, and, a kind of joy that is deeply sustainable, a kind of joy that is never ending, that happens when we can tune into this, what Marshall called beloved divine energy, the living energy of needs as they arise in ourselves and other people. and we seek to contribute. It's for me, it's like, oh, it's the most yummy form of joy I've found. I used to be into like rollerblading and snowboarding and doing all kinds of activities for joy. And those were fun for the time I was doing it, and I wasn't falling and hurting myself. And then I would not be doing it, and it was like, oh, my joy stopped. I'm not doing that thing anymore. But this is like never-ending joy. Because when you contribute to another person, you feel that joy in the moment, but it's like it sustains you. All you have to do is remember, like, oh, remember that sweet moment that we got to share? And there's another burst of joy. So when we create many of these moments, the joy just keeps growing.
Mm.
And that's just a vision, a seed I want to plant in terms of what's possible. This is so much more than just a form of beneficial communication. It's so much more than reducing conflict and increasing harmony. It's truly a spiritual path, and one that can create this sense of joy that just goes on and on and on.
Mm. There's some really wonderful comments and a question in the chat box. Um, Scott T wrote, "This is challenging. I was raised to help and respect others, which usually means to say yes. So that would be the duty and obligation part of it, which is an interesting, almost philosophical question. When are we doing things out of duty and obligation? And I guess, the question for any of us when we're in that is, again, am I having resentment? Am I doing this? Now, there's times that we can be in duty and obligation and it feels joyful, right? The joy of being in duty, the joy of taking care of the child, the joy of fulfilling our obligations. So is it joyful? And uh, just again, philosophically, are we doing it with love? It's my duty, even if it's my job, my duty is to be the dishwasher. Am I washing those dishes with joyfulness and love, or am I doing it with resentment? And I mean, I could go on, but it's so important to do everything with love. I believe it so much that I actually hired one of our musical artists on the Awakening World to take the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love, and to change the word, the refrain to do everything with love. Let's do everything with love. And if we can't do something with love that's a duty or an obligation, we need to re-examine our relationship to that duty, to that obligation. So thank you,
Yeah.
Scott T, for inspiring me because I wanted to share all that. Katrina.
Yeah, I see Aru has a really good question here as well. Out of duty is a tough one. People who do not have a good relationship with their parents, with their parent, but their parent has cancer and needs caregiving. So are there times that our duty overrides giving from the heart? Um, I Personally, I would say yes. Not everyone would agree with that. Personally, I would say yes. And it's a great example. Um, there is what I would call a sacred duty of caring for our parents and our children. It's this familial bond, or if there are really dear friends, like there is a duty of going outside of our comfort zone. It may not feel joyful, but oh my goodness, is it needed?
Hmm.
The if I'm not there, is someone else there? And if no one else is there, that person who is vulnerable and needs care could go into serious crisis. And that's something to be held with the utmost care. So even if it doesn't feel great in the moment, I'd say there is a time for duty. Similarly, we could look at the example of Martin Luther King, and he took on a duty of whatever he could to increase civil rights. How was it for him and all of those marchers to go through Birmingham, Alabama, knowing what was coming? They took on a sacred duty for a higher cause. And so I do want to acknowledge that there are times when we take on a sacred duty for higher cause that does not feel good. I do want to acknowledge that. And still, if we find ourselves going into resentment, if there
Mm,
isn't some part of us that can choose it, then either see if you can work through the resentment or see if you can find an alternative that
mhm,
will settle your soul. You didn't have
mm,
to go marching in Birmingham, Alabama.
mm.
And thank God so many chose to do that, because that was a turning point in history that touches me today, as you can see. Thank God people show up to care for their parents, to care for their children, because these are truly vulnerable people. Thank God that happens. And if you're taking care of your parent and you're resenting it the whole time, can you find any other way for your parent to receive care from other qualified individuals so that you can give
Mm.
yourself a breather and reduce the resentment that's arising? You know, there there are so many out of the box options that could be possible, and you might need support from someone else. Like, this is just, it's wearing me thin. I don't have the capacity. I've got a lot of stuff as it relates to my parent that's unhealed. If that's true for you and you're asked to care for your parent in a time of need, that's a lot to carry. What will help you carry that? Do you need empathy? Do you need coaching support? Do you need caregiving support? What is it? And then you look at every resource possible to bring in that support so that you can soften the burden to yourself. But personally, I would say there is a time for sacred duty. There is a time for stepping out of the comfort zone for something that's a higher calling.
I'm really appreciating some of the commitments people are making. Audrey writes, yes, I want to know how to do everything with love. And earlier, she also acknowledged that her desire to um, always do things from with sacred consent. So, thank you. I mean, that's ideally what we're all doing. We're like, okay, this is a way, this is a path forward in life, and how to do it. I also want to address, Brad asked a really important question. He asked, will you also be sharing how to say no with grace? And
Yeah.
yes,
This is the hearing no. But yes, you know what? I didn't put that slide in, and I will make a note. I will make a slide on that one as well because it's so important. But maybe Scott, you could
I
brief
do
that one
have.
and then this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, what we love to teach is how to set boundaries or say no with compassion. And I have, over the years, developed a little three-step way to do that that I found is really useful. So when you're saying no, or when you're setting a boundary, lead with authentic reassurance that you care about this person, right? Whatever's true for you, that you care about them, or in some cases that you love them. Um, Lead with that. Now, it needs to be authentic. The reason we do that is because oftentimes when we hear no, the other person hears no, they might think you don't care about them. They might even lay a guilt trip on you. If you really loved me, if you really cared for me, you would do what I say. And we all have probably experienced that kind of guilt tripping thing. So head it off at the pass. Lead with authentic reassurance that you care. And then you say no, or you set the boundary. And when you do it in that firm place, because whenever we're saying no to one thing, we're saying yes to something else. If we're saying no, I can't give you a ride to the airport, it's because I'm saying yes to a previous commitment that I have that would conflict with driving you to the airport. So when we say our no or set our boundary, we're clear within ourselves, and ideally we express why. Not out of defensiveness, but out of clarity, helping the other one to understand. I'm not saying no just to say no. I'm saying no because I have this other commitment. I have this other obligation. And then the third and final part to to this little three-step process is when we do say no or set a boundary, they're likely to be disappointed and or have some sort of uncomfortable feeling because we're not meeting their need. Give the gift of your presence to their discomfort. Be present to their discomfort. Don't change your boundary, don't change your no, but you can acknowledge whatever uncomfortable feelings or unmet needs have come up for them. You can ask and listen, or you can kind of guess what they might be what uncomfortable feelings and unmet needs arose from you saying no, and stay with them, not for the purpose of changing it, but for the purpose of maintaining connection. We could even call it the boundary or the no sandwich. Authentic reassurance that you care. The no or the boundary is in the middle, and then the other piece of bread, if you will, is presence to their unmet needs and their uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
Katrina?
All right. Recognize we're starting to get to the end of our time here, and of course we'll have extra time for people who want to stay with us past 11. When they say no, of course we want to be gracious with that. Thank you for sharing your honest response. Give them reassurance, because the programming is it's not safe to say no, and you want to establish yourself as someone who is safe to say no to. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. That's meaningful to me. Then pause, because there's a moment of emotional tension. And so we just want to give a pause to that moment so that both people have the opportunity for their nervous system to relax. And then if they're willing, you can ask, would you be willing to share with me what considerations led to your no? So Scott gave the example of how you could say no. I'm not able to do this. I have these other commitments. I care about your needs. So he was proactive in sharing some of those considerations, but people are not always proactive. They might just be like, no, and then they're done. And if you can stay connected in a way that anchors emotional safety, the conversation doesn't have to end there. You can find out what are their considerations, and then it's possible you might be able to find a new solution that takes their considerations fully to heart and still could meet your own needs. So it opens the door for a deeper sense of relating and the possibility of co-creating some kind of a win-win solution, something that they are a yes to. I was a no to your first request, but now that I've been heard clearly, and I hear what you want, I'm open to seeing if we can find a solution, right? So now you're on the same team. So that's hopefully the direction that we go to. This piece in here, it's a large worksheet. We'll go through this more thoroughly in future sessions. It's way too much to try and do right now, but I will say basically, when something happens, we start with self-connection. Do we want to connect or not with the other person? If not, we set a boundary with compassion. And Scott just gave an example of that. If it's a yes, we go into empathy, self-empathy and empathy for other. This creates the foundation for a request. Then we have information on how a request can work. And if the answer is no, we want to see if we can stay connected and get more information to see if we can find a win-win. And these three types of requests are ways that we can dance with that final step to see if we might be able to find a win-win. So connection request is, would you please let me know what you heard? I'd like to know if I was understood as I intended. Could you tell me what you heard me say? Would you be willing to give me empathy? Those would be connection requests. Action requests we've already looked at, specific doable action. Offers might be, oh, I hear that this doesn't work for you. Would you like to brainstorm something that does work for both of us? So there's times we can make offers. Would you like me to reflect back what I heard you say, just to make sure I'm understanding you accurately? So those are 3 types of requests. I'm just going to pop through these slides so you can see them, and then we can come back in whatever way makes sense. So if they say no, we accept their no, we stay respectfully engaged. Then there's opportunity to learn about their no and empathize with them. Honor their no the way you would want your own no to be honored, right? The golden rule comes in. This creates a deeper connection where we're moving from me versus you, my perceptions versus your perceptions, my feelings and needs versus your feelings and needs, into us versus a problem we're trying to solve. And that's where we move into being collaborators. And then the final slide is just, we hope you use these tools in your life. So that's what we have for the slides. And I know I zipped through those a bit quickly. Scott, is there anything you want to add to any of these?
No, no. I mean, I think Audrey writes, this is so helpful. DR writes, this is fabulous. And yes, Susan Bloomquist, I agree. Katrina's slides rock. Um, I think I know that you want to be ending right at 11 o'clock. I would like us just to go back, I think maybe to review the forms of request, because that is one of the most fundamental pieces. So if people don't mind, we might be a minute or two later. Um, but uh, yeah, these forms of request are really important. And at the very, very beginning, we talked a lot about connection requests. And it's really important to start with a connection request. How well resourced are you? I want to have a conversation with you. Is this a good time? Um, would you be willing to have a chat with me right now? So really starting with creating connection and a connection request before we jump to the action. Um, and I'm making a big point of this because as a coach who all day long I'm working with people, almost everybody falls into the mistake of going straight to action demands as opposed to starting with connection requests. And I see that Katrina's got something really good to take a look at here. So turn it over to Katrina.
Sure. Yeah. So the slide is the quick overview, and I just wanted to let you know you also will receive this PDF. This goes, woo, I zoomed out a bit much here. It goes into steps for building a request. So you start here with your just, let's just get going. What's the request you want to make? Then you test your request, and then we're just looking to see if we can refine it here. Some helpful phrases. Here is how to make an offer. And then this goes into some deeper information on those kinds of requests, right? The top one, those are connection requests. And then it's requests for action, and then it's offers. So these are all resources that you have to be able to practice that final step of negotiation. You don't always have to jump straight to an action request. If it's not working, you don't have enough information, then these kinds of let's go deeper requests can make a really big difference. So you'll have that available with this course. You'll also have the 4 quadrants of requests. So we talked about vague, specific, vague demand and specific demand. So there's a 2-page worksheet on that. And then notes on pretty much everything we covered. You'll also have this, I think it's 14-page PDF along with questions that you can explore to really go into the art of making requests and to remind yourself of all of these tools. So I just wanted to let you know that those are all there, of course, along with the slides. Yeah, I think I'll pause there and see if there's anything in the chat, if there's any questions that are arising.
Brad says, I interpret a lot of this as being curious about yourself and others. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Curiosity is possibly one of the most, I would say, right after compassion, curiosity is the most wonderful quality to bring into our relationships. Really
Yeah.
being curious and noticing whenever we're falling into judgment, replace it with curiosity. All right. Um, Maybe go to gallery view for a moment. Um, and by raise of hands, who would like to stay for our optional discussion group and practice hour? Who would like to stay for that? Diara, Audrey,
Perhaps we could stop the recording because we're done with our teaching section and now we're going into more of our private coaching and practice section.
you're absolutely right.